and then I do a little, so apparently it says you are live, and then I do a little check for posterity that we are actually live on. Oh yeah, I've got the message to say you are live. And then I'm gonna have, oh no. Oh, that's super cool. They've just changed that. Okay, this is really stupid, but I don't care. Look. Oh. So when people go to my profile, they can see us now.
Oh, very cool.
So I knew they changed some of the functionality, but I didn't realize how. 1 second. No, I don't like that. Let's do that one. Yes, no, we can just kind of give it a few seconds or minutes or whatever. And then usually people start to trail in and then say hi. But this is like the tenuous bit, because you're like, oh, I wonder who's going to show up today.
Good.
No, I'm ready. Do you know something? I didn't put my surname, but I guess people don't need it. No, this is. Sometimes I wonder if I should play music, but I'm looking at my books in the background. It's like, does this make me look intelligent or not? Because I think that was, I remember reading when I was on maternity leave at the beginning of the pandemic, and they were like, once upon a time when people were doing online calls, it's kind of great to show off your apartment, but now it's kind of like library walls where people have like big walls of books, or kind of strategically placing books so that it's like, oh, I'm reading this, just to be a little bit current.
Indeed. I decided to go for the record collection in mine.
Oh, hold on. Is that what that is?
Yeah, this is my record shelf.
Is that a deck?
Yes, I've got a turntable on top of that. So, yeah.
So, do you know something? It's really stupid.
So, I'm strategically placing records instead of.
So, what's that one at the front?
This one is Catronado.
So, like, now you've taken me to, like, I'm like, who?
Okay. So, Catronado is a Montreal-based DJ producer. Works with loads of artists. Really, really good. Like, blends sort of house, soul, jazz, a bit of everything, a bit of Latin. Like, one of my favorites.
Oh. No, I'm looking him up now. Okay, I'm gonna have to look this up.
This album's called 99.9%.
Oh, okay. Let me. It says it. Okay, I'm reading through who he's like through his career. It's like he collaborated with Craig David. Okay, there's like one person I recognize. Right. I'm definitely going to check that out. Oh, that's awesome. I didn't even still think, well, I thought people only collected vinyl like from old school stuff. I didn't realize that's cool.
No, I've been buying vinyl since I was like 14. And like I've really put an emphasis back on it the last few years, because like I've got vinyl that I've inherited, right? I don't inherit money because I'm not from that background, but I inherit records.
Yes.
So I'm like, at the end of the day,
let's be serious though. When you think of like that life, like I think like my mum's generation, like sound system life and all that stuff, your records, that is your wealth though. Like it might not be physical money, but inheriting records is a big deal.
Yeah. So when you think you can't pass your Spotify playlist down to your kids, right? So owning physical records is actually pretty important. So anything that I really, really love, I will buy a physical copy of it.
That's so deep and unexpected, like just that we're talking, because you made a really good point, because I love music, and my iTunes catalog's huge, and I can't even transfer it over to my new laptop, which is super annoying. But you're right, like how do you share it with your kids? I mean, I've got some CDs, and some of them I played so much that it's actually scratched into some of the stuff, like some of the songs I really like just doesn't play anymore. But that's a really good point. Like, what do you do? Or do you create like a playlist, like an online playlist that you can give your kids that's just like an audio file or something? But I like that idea that you're actually
but like, there's a lot of dependencies on there. Like, who's going to host the playlist? Are they still going to be around in 50 years? Are we still going to use the same file formats in 50 years? Because you can pick up a record from the 1940s and play it right now like it was just pressed. Like, there's no compatibility issues or anything like that.
why are you taking it there? Like, why do I feel like now I need to go start buying vinyls? But you're right, though. Like, the things that do last the test of time in that sense are things that are easily compatible with every phase of life. Something like a vinyl, like having decks, like that's forever. That's awesome. Like now you've got me thinking. And because I love music, like that's some real food for thought for me now. Cause I'm like, you're right. All of these other dependencies, I've never thought about it like that. I was just thought like, yeah, you can create a file or, leave your laptop or whatever. Hello. I'm not sure who it is because unfortunately it only says LinkedIn user. So who do we have on the line? But hi, anyway. Yeah, LinkedIn does this sometimes where it just like blocks people out. Is that drilling really loud or is it just on my side?
It's very faint.
Okay, cool. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we can kick off.
Very good.
But literally, I did not expect you to have told me something now that makes me feel like, when I'm thinking about legacy, I've just thought about it all wrong. Hi, Tinashe.
Hello.
I love that, all the way from South Africa. Well, I will leave the banner on just for a little piece more as people still join, because sometimes it takes like up to like 5-6 minutes until everybody gets in, but we have time anyway. So I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for joining, Lindsey. I'm super excited to have you here today, just because as we spoke before, and all the work that you're doing in general brings us to such a huge crescendo and thinking about impact and how we can change industries, change views. And as I said, I'm super excited that you're here. I think most people know who I am, but just in case you don't, I'm Leanne Meyer, and I am the founder and managing director of LM Consulting. And we specialize in working with asset managers, VCs, PE firms, to really help them embed a sustainable approach when it comes to gender equality, but also making sure that anything that they're doing doesn't leave Black women behind. Just because thus far this has seemed to be, and is still, a very large problem within financial services. Getting women through the door and keeping them, but getting Black women through the door and keeping them is another issue altogether. And that's kind of part of the way I choose to create my impact. And this is like the real reason for the series, because I think it's really important for us to be able to sit down and have conversations, because impact doesn't happen in a silo. It's totally collaborative, and it's about shining a light on everybody who's doing something in earnest, but also with the view of making sustainable long-term change, that it's not about just us as individuals, but something that speaks to a higher purpose, a higher goal. And to the point that you're talking about before, Lindsey, just in terms of like a legacy, it's, how do you leave a legacy that shows that you've made a change? So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you to give a brief introduction about who you are, and then we can jump straight in with the first question, which is, what does impact mean to you, and how is it that you choose to make your impact, and in what sphere?
Okay, thank you, Leanne. A real pleasure to be joining you here for this talk. Hello to everyone who's joined in. Really, really pleased that you could join us today. So, as Leanne mentioned, I'm Lindsey Stewart. My background is mostly in investor relations and financial analysis. Several qualifications which you can look up on my LinkedIn profile. Work for major organizations both in the UK, continental Europe, and internationally. Really thinking about what do investors want from companies in terms of their reporting, in terms of their strategy, in terms of their management, and translating that into actions that companies can use. And latterly been kind of applying that knowledge within the arena of audit and accounting. Mm-hmm. So that's me in a nutshell. Why are we here talking about making an impact? Well, recently, in association with CFA Society in the UK, I've been helping to run a campaign with a great group of people, talking about really what Black people have to offer organizations or diverse talent more broadly as well, but specifically focusing on Black professionals. We called it What I Know Is. If you look up hashtag What I Know Is on LinkedIn, you can look at all the videos that everyone's submitted. And we thought that video element was really important because it's so important to be visible and out there with your opinion, which is part of the making an impact theme that we're going to talk about. What I spoke about specifically in that campaign was the idea of looking to make twice the difference instead of working twice as hard as we are so often encouraged to do.
Can we take a pause there a second?
Yeah, sure.
I want you to repeat it because, like you said at the end, you were so used to working twice, thrice, 4 times as hard. But I love your concept. So can you just say that just one more time so that everyone can kind of just soak it in for 2 seconds?
Sure. Yeah. So repetition for emphasis. I spoke I spoke about looking to make twice the difference instead of trying to work twice as hard.
Awesome. That right there. When you first said it to me, I was like, wow, okay, talk to me, because this is something, especially as we know within the Black community, we've been conditioned to thinking about we always have to work twice as hard. And I just felt like this is really pinpointing how we can leverage our skills, seek opportunities. And when I say exploit, I mean in the way the word's meant, not the negative connotation. Exploit the situation to then create even more impact. So sorry, I jumped in there, but please carry on. Please carry on.
No, quite all right. So yes, that's kind of a reflection of my own personal journey, because I feel like for most of my career, I was very much in sort of this, essentially it's kind of like a very common British working class mentality that, you know, you put in the work, you don't draw too much attention to yourself, stay humble, don't grumble, get the job done, and you will be noticed for it, and you'll get the rewards that you deserve in time. Now, for quite a lot of my career, I was fortunate enough to be in a position working at a smaller organization where that was actually largely true for me, where I did put in the work, I didn't draw attention to myself. And like, I was lucky enough to have managers that did notice the effort that I was putting in, even though I wasn't standing on my table shouting about it, and kind of opened doors for me to move into different opportunities, such that I got to travel around, advise companies at quite an early stage of my career, for which I'll always be grateful. But then eventually got moved into a much larger organization, you know, a Big Four global accounting and audit network, where the rules of the game are slightly different, and where you actually do need to get into the habit of taking credit for what you did. It's important that you don't take credit for what other people did. Right. I'm not a believer in that, but you do have to take credit for what you did.
You're not a believer in that, but we also know that a lot of people are. But you're right. We have to put the stamp on our work, because if we don't, somebody else is actually very much prepared to do it. Is the other truth of the coin. You know, we don't do it, and I'm not encouraging anybody to do it. But you know, as you said, the law being different, the rules of the jungle being very different in corporate world is just, I could say loads on that, but please carry on.
Sure. So I was not prepared for those new rules, right? So I got into situations where, you know, I was kind of really pushing hard, like doing things that I felt I was bringing quite a unique perspective on things. Like I've made a point of being a constant learner, acquiring a very broad range of skills. So on the one hand, you know, I can read financial accounts, I can interpret them, I can see the investor perspective in them. At the same time, I can also write to a decent standard, I can write code, I can program, I can build systems. A lot of things I'm kind of injecting into this work.
Right.
That, you know, I'm kind of putting all of that into it, but not saying anything about, okay, look, I'm doing this, and this. And so my work kind of got wrapped up into the team's effort. And so I start getting frustrated that, like, okay, well, you know, I'm doing all of this, but I don't really feel like I'm getting noticed for it, to the point where, you know, I'll have conversations with people where they say, I need to make more of an impact. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant. I felt the impact I needed to make was to work twice as hard.
Right.
It was. So I'm wearing myself out and working harder and harder and putting more and more of myself into my work and getting frustrated and not really getting the results I want. So eventually you just kind of get to a point where you feel a change of approach is needed. And I actually worked with a psychologist on this for quite some time because, you know, I was just wearing myself out, burning myself out, and recognized I needed help. So decided to, you know, get therapy, work with a psychologist, and started seeing myself and the efforts I made quite a lot differently. And so that's kind of where this idea of looking to make twice the difference comes from.
Right. And I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna go back for a few things, and I'm gonna say this. Number one, there's a really key point that you said there, which was you recognized that you needed help, and you went and sought that help, and you sought a psychologist. And I think that's just like a key point in any case that we need to focus on, especially just for 2 seconds, especially as, you know, Black people in general, but I mean, Black people specifically, but in general, just because of the stigma within the Black community with around getting help, but understanding that getting help is the opportunity to see things from a different perspective, but also it's the turning point. It's the turning point in the cog to make the machine go. When things stop working the way you see them working, it means that there's a reason why the cog can't turn anymore. There's blockage. And when you go to see help, it might be a slight adjustment. The cog might be pushed forward or backwards, but whatever it does, or it might even just be adding some oil, but whatever it does, it means that the cog can move again. And the sign of this frustration is the point where it says to you, it's time for me to recalibrate what it is that I am doing. Because whilst a lot of things are external and there's a lot of things that are outside of our control, there are very few things that we can control. But one thing that is possible to control is our reaction to situations. And if your reaction to situations in the initial phase is I'm getting angry, as opposed to hearing that your body is telling you that there's something wrong here, you also put yourself in the paths of missed opportunities because you're not in the right mindset. And to your point, Lindsey, just talking about it wasn't working. This for me is also that critical point of where mindset is so crucial, because going through my career, I've seen that I've also missed opportunities because I wasn't ready for them, because I hadn't done any calibration. I was still hoping to grind the cogs and push the cogs forward no matter what happened, as opposed to saying, you know what, let me remove the friction and figure out what's causing the issue here. And I just thought that this was like a really powerful point that you made just about getting help, identifying it, but then also being brave enough to get it. And then thirdly, today, amplifying that by actually speaking about it within a public arena, which says, I'm not ashamed of this. This is critical. This is critical to the path. This was critical to the birth of something that I believe in. That doesn't always mean we have to work twice as hard, but we can still make twice the difference. That was the first thing. And then my second thing that made me think a lot was something I always also experience, which is when we start to expand our own horizons, and it doesn't matter in what direction, you know, for me, from the communications coach side, from the being even dating coach side, from all these different parts, the way to read people, the way to understand personalities, you know, history, whatever it might be, you bring all of these facets to your job and it makes you a better person at your job. But if you don't, as you said before, if you don't tell anybody, then they just take that as bog standard Leanne, bog standard Lindsey, and don't recognize and see the extra value of the input you're putting in to be this finished product, and not just static input, but dynamic input. That to keep being at the top of your game, you have to keep putting in the work. You have to remain intellectually curious. You can't just say, I'm here, I'm finished, because none of us are. And I think corporates don't understand that there's a lot of this going on. There's a lot of us bringing loads of different parts of our lives, our personal discoveries to our jobs to make it better. And those are skills that you're not being acknowledged for, but are very, very relevant.
Yeah, very, very truly. And there is definitely a lot of thought that has to go into making the impact that you want to make at work. It's not going to just happen automatically. So I mentioned earlier that I was working with a psychologist, and one of the most important learnings I got from this was the question, asking oneself the question, what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do? Because I would get into these conversations with him, and I'll outline all of my frustrations with this situation, with this person, with this particular process, with this system. Okay, all of that's well and good.
Right.
What are you going to do? And it kind of drags you out of that mindset where it thinks, okay, sit back, fold my arms. This person needs to do that. They need to do that. They need to do that. This needs to change. What are you going to do?
Correct.
Right. And then I had to kind of completely reframe everything. It's like, okay, well, that system I can't change. I can work with it, or I could work around it, but I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm going to do for myself, rather than worrying about what this person or that person is doing. And it completely kind of turns things around. It starts thinking about, even though there are things out there in the world that we know are not fair, they do need to change. You have to think about, what are you going to put into this, and what do you plan to take out of it in terms of how you're going to benefit yourself and how you're going to benefit other people. Really, really important learnings there.
No, it is, because I think we get ourselves into the situation, and this is something that's super critical in terms of everything that everybody does, which is, it's easy to be on your high horse and be like, everything else that everybody else is doing is wrong. But when you start to realize that life isn't passive, and it doesn't just happen to you, that you have a choice to either be active and let it happen. Passive and let it happen, or be active and make a change. You realize you have options, because I think, a lot of the times there is this paralysis around everything's bad, everything's happening to me. It's not happening to you. Part of it is what you're allowing to happen. And the other part is, how much are you going to take the bull by the horns and actually say, no, I'm going to change what I can change. Because as you said, not everything's fair, not everything can be changed, but there's still a large amount of control that we have in terms of how we deal with situations, how we deal with our environment. And that then has on a knock-on effect, because if people know you're not going to accept this kind of behavior, or you're going to take a different approach, it changes their relationship to everything else. And I think that is a really good, what are you going to do about it? It's fine complaining. When I say fine complaining, everyone knows, I hope everyone knows what I mean, just as in, life isn't always easy. It's okay to complain, but at what point do you go and move into solutions mode? At what point do you change the complaint into being a point to fuel you to do something to change the outcome?
Yes, indeed.
We can't sit here forever and just moan. We have to start, and I think and this is why I really love the way you view things, because what it also does is it brings it down to, you can moan, that's fine. But moaning stops here. Let's change the energy. Let's change the discourse. And now let's think about, how do we then change that? So how did you then get to that part of understanding the role you had to play, and then moving that into thinking about making twice the difference?
Okay. That's an interesting question. So having kind of got into that, what am I going to do mentality, like, I started looking at the way I approach certain projects or tasks completely differently. So it wasn't just a case of, look at everything that's on the board, do as much of it as you can, spend all the hours you can do, right? It's a case of another important learning here.
The to-do list is like, you think that you're doing well if you get everything ticked off, which isn't always right. I know that. Yeah. The training you get, right?
That working twice as hard mentality.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And the important thing about that is, when you decide what you're going to do, what's equally important is deciding, what are you not going to do? Like, what are you going to decide? Okay, that will be done by someone else, or it won't be done at all.
Right.
And where I can make the difference is part 1, part 2, part 6. I can bring this skill, that skill, and this skill, and I can also add this to make sure that, it makes the maximum, it reaches the most people possible, that kind of thing. Right. And so you start being intentional about what you get involved in, how you spend your time, what is the best use of it. And it enables you to kind of carve out the time for the sort of the rest of relaxation, the friends and family time that you actually need, instead of grinding hour after hour, day after day, and getting frustrated because you're putting effort into areas where you're not necessarily making the maximum impact. You're just getting things done, the things where you need a person that doesn't necessarily have to be you.
Right. And I think what you then do is, in the cases of trying to get down the whole to-do list, is you dilute the potency of your skill set. So, you will be known for being the person that gets things done, but you won't potentially be known for being a particularly strategic person for this, and this. You won't be known for the extra parts of your skill set and delivery, because they'll go, okay, you know what, Lindsay gets it done, Leanne gets it done, which is a very, very different point. And that level of self-selection, if we're honest, being able to select in that context takes a lot of confidence, but it also, and when I say confidence, it's the confidence to vocalize that to your boss and say, hey, you know something, I could do all of these physically, I am capable. But if we want to utilize me to the best of my abilities, then you'd only pick me to do X, Y, Z. More than that doesn't make any sense, because I think somebody who has this skill set or that skill set or whatever could do it a lot better. And that takes a lot of confidence. And it especially takes a lot of confidence as a Black person within the corporate world, because there's so much that sits behind that, which is that we should be grateful for the job, that we should just, keep your head down, move on, that, if we just do everything that we're given, we will be recognized eventually for that work, which really goes against how we see success really working, which is, the fallacy of meritocracy. That's not the case. It's about network. It is. I'm not saying it's not about skill. There is some level of skill, but it's also the ability to be strategic about the moves that you're trying to make within a company, and not shy away from the word strategic, not shy away from skills. What I really thought was cool when you spoke at the beginning is you listed what you're good at, and you did it unashamedly, you did it unapologetically, which is what we have to be able to do to be able to really create the momentum and that vibe of, I am confident in who I am, I'm confident in my skills. And for me to be able to make the largest impact as an employee, I have to be able to sit in my skills, and I have to be able to further my skills. What do they say? You can improve your weaknesses, but improving your weaknesses only gets you so far. It's better to work on your strengths. By the way, it varies what your weaknesses are, by the way. I'm just caveating it with that. But, usually you say work on your strengths, because that will get you a lot further. And I think it's being able to have that confidence in all conversations and being able to put that forward, so that when you're making the suggestions that aren't really a suggestion, but when you're saying it, it's not a question. It's not, I'm running this by you. This is a strategic move. Do you want to leverage me in the best way possible? If I perform well, you as my manager, you perform well. But if you want to restrict me, then this doesn't look good on you. Great team. A manager is only ever as good as their team.
Yeah, all very strong points. I love that you mentioned confidence there, Leanne, because I think quite a lot of the learning for me in that process was assigning oneself some importance, which when you first approach that concept, coming from where I was, almost felt a bit transgressive. Like, no, me, I'm not important. Other people are important. Those people up there are important. I'm not right. But and then you start saying things that, like, when you start assigning yourself some importance, you start saying things that you never thought you'd say, like, I can do that, or I can do this, but both of them won't be done, and I think the second one's more valuable. So what would you like me to do? Those kinds of things, those kinds of conversations. And you find out that people aren't actually averse to having those conversations at all. It's quite a discovery.
Just, it makes me smile, right? Because, like, when I started working, I probably had when I say it wasn't an inflated self of importance in that sense, it was just that I was brought up to believe that no matter who you are, what, like, doesn't matter if how senior someone is, at the end of the day, they're a person and you should be able to address them as such. And, you know, at the beginning, I was talking to like really senior people as though like me and them were best buddies. And it wasn't them who had a problem with it. It was actually other people who pulled me aside to be like, you can't talk to him like you and him are kicking it in the pub because he's super senior to you. I'm like, but he talks to me. It doesn't matter how he talks to you. You have to show him a sign of deference. But, you know, but we're having a conversation. Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. And I'll be honest, for a few years, this whole concept of hierarchy, seniority, and all that kind of stuff really annoyed me, because I was like, on the one hand, I had my own internal value, but then I realized that a lot of people still ascribe them to themselves the level of, well, I'm senior, I'm more important, therefore. And they also expected a certain level of behavior. But after a certain point, just to your point, I was like, you know something, I can't do it. So this is who I am. This is who, back then I was Leanne Cooper. This is who Leanne Cooper is. This is what she wants to do. And this is the conversation that I'm going to have. Now, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes I still got in trouble for it. But it was one of those ones where it's a trial and error. Colleagues won't always accept you walking in with confidence and also holding your head up high and being able to say, no, that this is my boundary. Boundaries always get pushed back, but it's not to say that we should decide to say, okay, let me just accept it. Because the key to this and making your own impact is being able to sit in your confidence and believing in the truth of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And if you know that your impact is something larger, greater, bigger, then it's only right that you follow that path that gets you there. And it's not to say that everybody always understands your path, but that doesn't make it any less valid. And that's why I love the fact that you had this campaign with CFA UK. What I know is because it's that, you know, a lot of people would have potentially shied away from doing a campaign that focused principally on Black people within financial services. You know, is it a problem? But you didn't. And I think this is a key point, because it's about, you know, we're talking not us right now specifically, but financial services companies at large are talking about diversity and inclusion, but a lot of the times they still don't want us to have a voice. They don't want us to step into our confidence to say, this is what I need to succeed. And I think this is the important part about making an impact with the companies, is pushing the companies to see, this is what I need from you in order for you to make sure I thrive in this environment. But we can only do that to a certain extent if we feel the confidence. It's not a conversation for every day. And I'm not saying have a battle every day, but there has to be that innate sense of, you know, self. And that takes work, but it also takes help. It takes help, and it's something that you can't do by yourself. And I think this is the part and, you know, as I said, I love the fact that you were so open about this, is because the help piece is the definitive piece in being able to even have these kinds of conversations, knowing that there's a support structure behind you.
No, definitely true. And yeah, you're right. That the help piece is important. I feel like, you know, sat where I am in the UK, it's something that even now, with all the progress that we've made on mental health and well-being, that people aren't quite always ready to talk about the fact that they're getting that kind of help. And it does cost us all, really. It's like people wouldn't hesitate to go to a hospital if they broke their ankle. So we should really get to a point where it's perfectly acceptable to go and seek yourself some help with mental health and self-image, if that's what you need. But also there's some issues on the supply side, making that easier to access as well would have been helpful, because overcome some obstacles there, but that's a whole other TED talk. But yeah, it's definitely an important piece.
Yeah, and I would also say, you know, I believe in prevention sometimes over a cure. It's like you don't eat yourself to diabetes. You hopefully manage that with diet beforehand, before it gets to that stage. You know, and I think it's stuff like that. I think therapy and psychologists, and I also had a therapist. I haven't had one for a while, but I had one a few years ago. It should be, in many cases, a complementary preventative measure to accompany. All the top people have coaches. You don't necessarily want to call it a psychotherapist or psychologist, but all the top people have coaches. And I think we have to get to that point of maximizing our personal impact, our impact in the world at large requires support and help in different forms. But all of that comes together to create something huge and something that can change the way we look at the world. And I think that's the key piece for me. It doesn't always have to be preventative. It can just be part, and should just be part of how you approach your life. Like, I want to do this, I want to do that. Let me get, it's a collaborative effort. Even if somebody is the face of a brand, they still probably have like 10, 15, 20 people behind them, helping them with everything to be able to achieve what it is that they need to achieve. So I think there's more to do. And I think there's a lot, and I mean, I'll let you speak on it, but I really love what you did with the What I Know Is campaign, because I think that is definitely a way to make impact, just for the fact that representation, especially within financial services, but representation full stop matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just for optics.
No, it's very true. It's very true. Representation does matter. It is not just for optics, but the optics is important for good reasons. That's why we were very keen to do a video campaign, because just the effect of seeing somebody who you relate to doing things out there in the world you might not necessarily have known about, because 20 years ago when I started, I didn't really know who else was out there that was from similar background to me, like whether ethnically or socioeconomically or from various perspectives. It's like people all just kind of, you hear about them, you might see their name, but you don't really know who they are in the way that you might do today. So kind of just having that, almost something that you can see and touch in the form of video out there was really important for us. And for a lot of people, for me particularly, I think, and I think for a few other people, that's a big hurdle to jump, the idea of just making yourself for a short while the center of attention, you speaking to a camera and publishing it to whoever can see it. Just one thing that you've picked up from your career. That's a bit of a hurdle to jump. I'm glad I've kind of cleared it, and now I'm kind of used to that sort of idea, to the point that now I'm having a live show talking about my career struggles. But yeah, I think just that visibility, optical visibility, is actually a more important piece than people often realize. But then also, just taking it a bit more widely, it's just having that what people often refer to as cognitive diversity or experiential diversity, just having that expressed through the various things that were mentioned throughout the videos, whether that's making twice the difference, or internal networking, or just raising your visibility, or sharing what you know. Really just finding different ways to make that critical difference that sets you out from other people, that really emphasizes the merits of why you're in the position you're in, is also super important.
Yep, for sure. And when I was thinking about optics, I wasn't thinking, I should have clarified that more. I was thinking in the sense of, the corporate structure, and that it's not, it shouldn't be just for optics, as in hiring Black people to make them there. So to be like, look, this is what it is. But to your point, in terms specifically within the CFA UK campaign, I think it is really, I can still remember the first Black person. I don't have CFA, by the way, in case anyone wants to know. I took the exam, the first level. I found out the day after my 30th birthday that I failed, and I said never again, because I'd given up all of my summer to study, and then I failed. So no, CFA was not for me, but that's because I just didn't have the wherewithal to do it. However, I still remember the first Black person I met with the CFA, and I was just like, wow, that's so amazing. Like, I'm so impressed. And like, he was hallowed for years and years, and he was a portfolio manager and all this kind of stuff. And just seeing him was just like, awesome. This is possible. It didn't matter that it was American. It was just like, this is possible. I might not be a man, but this is possible. And that's why, and we talked about it briefly before, but when you don't see people in a certain position, both internally, like as in as the person, but externally as in the message that companies send is that if you do not look like a certain profile, you cannot be successful in this role. And this is why it's so amazing to see different people doing different things within CFA UK saying, well, hey, I'm here. I don't know if I'm the only one, but you can at least know that I'm there. Because it gives others rise to, to hope. And I think somehow, I mean, I don't know how you're going to do this, Lindsey, but I think there has to be like a step-by-step process, even talking about learning how to find your making twice the difference or something, because I think that's so inspirational, because I am sure that based on, they call it black tax, but based on black tax and all these different things, that a lot of people who are super successful have found a way to make twice the difference in a lot of cases. And I love the idea of it, finding where you can strategically use your skills to the best of your ability to optimize whatever outcome you want.
Yeah. And that's really the core of it. It's like really thinking about what is it that you can do? What areas have you excelled in? Is there anything that you can add to your portfolio? So people who follow me know I post a lot of weekend reading posts. I do quite a lot of learning in my spare time. So I'm always kind of looking for things either in my area or in a different area that I can kind of add to sort of my portfolio of skills, that eventually I can turn those and apply them to something that maybe no one has really thought about in a particular way. Like I've mentioned before on LinkedIn that I'm a huge fan of the book Range by David Epstein, which gives loads of examples of how people with a broad complement of skills, called, the generalists out there, can really make a difference in the world. There was one example of two people working in very different industries. So a person in industry A had this problem, this intractable but common problem that he was trying to solve. And person from industry B had a very similar problem conceptually, but not operationally, that was just solved routinely in industry B using a very basic solution. And when person A and person B actually spoke to each other, eventually they solved that intractable problem in industry A. And so that's the kind of mentality you have to be in to kind of look to make twice the difference. It's about thinking what knowledge exists out there that isn't necessarily directly applied in this particular area at the moment, but might lead to an answer somewhere. And I've been doing a lot of that kind of thinking in my most recent role, where I'm thinking about, okay, how can audits better serve investors that audit reports are addressed to? And so I'm taking a lot of ideas from investor relations, from portfolio management theory, from psychology, from all kinds of things, and thinking, okay, how would this work? What kind of difference could we make here? What might need to change there? So yeah, that's like the kind of thinking that I find I've benefited from trying to get into.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think when you're trying to apply, when I say an out of the box, let's say a new method that you've taken from another industry, I think fundamentally that has to, but both industries have to interest you, because I think it's very difficult to try and randomly find a practice from one industry to the other. Like, how do you mix it together? Like for me, I think, in the way I approach things, my love of history and understanding how things start from the beginning very much dictates my approach when working with corporates as to how they've gotten to the situation that they have today, and then how do you build it going forward. But that extrapolation of historical events is something that I've learned completely outside of my job. Sometimes it's, in fact, it's come from my love of history, but also when I eat, I like to know exactly all of the ingredients and like to know where they come from. So you have to kind of have the breadth in yourself. And I think that sometimes is taking the time. And I think time is such a precious commodity that we also don't often get to leverage. And this is the vicious circle, because when the cogs are doing this, the one thing you seem to lack is time. And the one thing you feel you lack is time. And the one thing you need the most is time to be able to take a step back and to create a sense of silence in order to really find out what it is that I call it, like I always say, in like 4 quadrants. What am I good at? What do I like doing? What am I bad at? What don't I like doing? And usually those 4 quadrants give you a really interesting, there's loads of things that I hate doing, but I'm good at it. Or conversely, there's loads of things I like doing, but I'm bad at it. And I think it's kind of creating the time and the space, because in order to be able to create the opportunities, you need to know where you're going to get this information from. And I think that's the hardest part. And I think that's why, just to, underscore everything with getting help and looking for ways, and this could be informal coaching, this could be informal mentoring, whatever it might be, just to help create that space so that you can kind of find the direction you want to go in, thus optimizing how you show up if you want it to be in the workplace, or it might even be leaving the corporate world and doing something new. But the creation of space, I think, is something that's super important that we often don't give ourselves the time to really do.
Yeah, all super, super important to give yourself that kind of space to really get a feel for where you're making that maximum impact. As you mentioned, those 4 quadrants, what do you like doing and what are you good at? And it's also just really helps you to kind of step back and enjoy your career. If you're really focusing on the things that you're good at and the things that make the most impact for you and for the organization, then your organization will be getting the best out of you, and you will also feel more personally fulfilled. So, and that's where it kind of starts to intersect with things like, what are your personal values? What are you here in the workplace to achieve? It really helps you frame what goals you want to set for yourself, where you want to take things next.
Right. And then I'm going to ask the clanger of a question, which is, you're like, where's she going with this?
I'm ready.
You ready? Which is, what would your advice be when you step into your, confidence space and you've isolated what you're good at, where your strengths are, and you go to your boss and you make the proposal and your boss is like, no, but I want you to do that. How would you then suggest that you can still, to some extent, optimize that, or find a way around it? What would be your view in that part?
Remember that you always have the option to negotiate. Like, the first no doesn't have to be the last one.
Love that.
And that's an important learning for me, because I'm not from a background where I was encouraged to disregard the first no that I ever heard. Right?
He's like, no.
Leanne's laughing because it might be true for you as well. Right?
Keep going.
Sometimes no is not now. Sometimes no is not yet.
Right.
Sometimes no is I haven't eaten yet.
No, is this
just find out. Right.
Don't go at face value, because it just might mean wrong time, wrong question, wrong time. But be prepared to explore the no. Be prepared to explore the no, because sometimes, I've heard no, and obviously I'm sure you can guess that the no's, I've not always accepted those. And sometimes the no's just been like, I've got other pressures on right now, and I'm like, yeah, but I really want to do this, come back in 2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think this is also, I think, was it yesterday? I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but I posted about the fact that companies are ignoring that people are choosing to leave. And I think because their values are no longer aligned, they're choosing to leave because they're not being listened to about how they can make changes. And I think this is one of the key points. Like, if somebody comes to you and says, I know that I can make an impact here for what we're trying to do, make the company a better place, make the company more productive, come with more innovative ideas, but I need to be able to do this and this and this. I think it really warrants not only listening to, but taking and making the changes, just for the fact that we are all moving to, or are already there, where we want to be in companies that are aligned to our values, not just to our values, but are also companies that care about people, that say, we want you to be the best version of yourself, and we will support that, because we understand that happy, fulfilled, supported employees give the best to the company, ergo we become more successful. And I think until that's kind of fully understood, which I don't think it is yet, I still think that we're in the stage of, you know, corporate culture first, human culture, as in like us as people second. I think until we've seen that shift, a lot of companies are really clamping down on their employees' potential to make as much impact as possible, to bring these innovative ideas, to bring in this cross industry, you know, cross, I don't know, practice kind of view, because that's really what makes things, I don't know, just makes better. It makes for a better environment. It makes for a more successful place. And there's something for us to learn from everything.
No, absolutely, truly. And yeah, companies, the message to bring one's whole self to work is heard a lot these days. But ask your employees, do you think bringing your whole self to work is a safe thing to do?
Right.
Some of them will think it is, and many won't. And for those that won't, you need to find out why.
Mm-hmm.
Or you will be blind to what your culture really is in the organization. There's a culture that you intend to have, and there's a culture that you actually have in any organization.
Correct.
And analyzing those differences is always going to be important in terms of helping your employees make the impact that they intend to make in the world. Right.
Because in the end, I mean, financial services is, for the most part, about making money. But, you know, now with the onset of sustainability, everyone's like, yes, but we now need to put things back into the community. Yeah, let's do that. I'm not criticizing it. I'm not knocking it. I'm saying that if that's what you want to preach externally, then you have to also make that felt internally by putting back, giving resource to, providing support to those who work for the company. Because what your output is a very different business to the business of taking care of people. Whatever your business is, you might sell phones, you might sell accounting, you might sell software. That's your output business. Your internal business is the business of taking care of people. And they can only make your output business better when you take care of them, as opposed to purely, I hate the phrase human capital. It just feels so cold. You know, instead of viewing them as human capital and herd, invest, take care, and you get more out. You make a better impact, but you also get the ideas, the stimulation, the whole collegiate environment that you ultimately want, so that people stay for longer. Loyalty.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you only really want to make an impact in places that you have a level of loyalty to. Otherwise, you just go and do your job. And we spend far too much time at work for it to only be a job.
Indeed. That's definitely the kind of angle that I'm approaching it from. It's like, I do want to do things that matter. And as much as even in financial services, there is the need to make money. I'm lucky enough that I'm working in an area of that field where people are actually very focused on the ultimate purpose of what they do, which is, what are we making money to do?
Right.
Like, if you're an organization who, okay, the person who's just entered the workplace, we need to find a way to give them a pension in their retirement 50, 60 years from now. Like, people who are very focused on those kinds of issues, I'm like lucky enough to be able to speak to them frequently, and it does give you a very different perspective on the impact that those people want to make in the world. And right. When you start talking about things like climate change and biodiversity and ESG, it makes for a very, very rich conversation for the people who can marry that purpose with the act of, you know, making money this year, this quarter, this next 5 years.
Right.
At least there's some of the most insightful conversations that I've had at work.
Yeah, there's no reason why. Someone said it to me as well in a live. There's no reason why you can't have profit and purpose. But if it's purely profit driven, then you lose a lot of the purpose, and you lose a lot of the, let's say, the interaction and the loyalty from those who work for the company. Hold on one second. We have another comment. So from Shalina. Interesting whole consideration in friendships, communities, work and home. I wonder how many of us hold parts back of our whole selves out of concern for being judged or excluded. Go on, you go.
Yeah.
I
was gonna just putting my hand up. I'm like, yeah, me for sure. I spent quite a lot of my time like doing that, like for just that fear of being judged or criticized or excluded it's kind of drilled into a lot of people. It's like you start seeing social exclusion as like the worst thing that could ever happen to you, or being criticized as the worst thing that can happen to you. And the one thing that I've had to learn to do personally is to kind of take the walls down, take the armor off, and just, okay, if somebody isn't entirely happy with you, that is actually life. Make the impact you're intending to make in the world. And if you know what your purpose is, you know what your values are, then, when you care about things that when you have opinions about things that people care about, not everyone's going to like it, but they will respect you more for having those opinions. Right. And so that's kind of a bit of a journey that I've been on, and I feel like other people can benefit from being on as well.
Yeah, I would say I'm going to take it a slightly different angle, just because I'd say my take is a little bit different. So I believe that in every single arena that we are in, we have a slightly, with every single person that we have a slightly different dynamic. If people watch 10 lives that I've hosted, I have a slightly different dynamic with the person that I'm talking to. But what is the same, the stable part are my values. The stable part is the way I think, but how I express it is different. So I'm guessing, like, now I would say, this is only now though, now I'd say I express my whole self in wherever I am, but I would say it's to varying degrees, because I still base that upon the audience I'm with, not in terms of being excluded or judged, but rather being able to read the room and the audience. Whereas previously, just like yourself, I remember when people used to say when I was younger, oh yeah, you're too much. And I used to take that as being really offensive. But then I realized, like and then for a long time, I kind of toned down that part of my too much behavior. And then at a certain point, like you said, you kind of realize in which way I'm going to be too much for somebody anyway. So let me be clear as to who I am and what my values are. And that is a massive journey. And understand that, like, reading the room doesn't mean you're not your whole self, but you're not going to worry. I'm not going to worry anymore about being too much, because as you said, not everybody likes it. So we shouldn't, we do, but we shouldn't let it get to us. But it's still very difficult sometimes when you see, just in general, like a certain type of person, and this is not about race, this is about like personality type, a certain type of person always gets ahead. Then sometimes you feel as though, well, maybe if I'm more like that, I'd have more success. It's a difficult one, the whole self part in general, just because vulnerability, no armor is vulnerable, but then you have to trust people. And I think it's a difficult balance to find sometimes. And even knowing what your whole self is, in many cases, varies from situation to situation. But I'm guessing, or I would say, just being honest with yourself in every being honest in every conversation is the most you can hope for, because each person brings out a different dynamic.
That's valuable context. Yeah.
I think that'll be my point. But like, I know that it's different, but like, as I said, you've made me think a lot, and it's been a really good conversation, because I think there's so much to take away in terms of getting to the point, because you think about impact and doing that, but there's so much behind that when you're trying to make an impact within the construct of a corporate organization. And what does that look like when you're not necessarily in control? It's easier to do that and say that when you're self-employed, but when you're trying to do that within particular frameworks, that's a very different beast to tame. So that's been super insightful. So, dearest Lindsey, where can everybody find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You can follow me there. I think that's the only social media that I'm on at the moment. But Yeah, and do look up hashtag what I know is by CFA UK on LinkedIn, and take a look at the videos. We'd love to hear your comments. Yeah, that's it really.
No, definitely. And by the way, when he says, you know, follow me, I think he means you can send me a LinkedIn request because it's perfectly fine. Yes. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. And thanks for your comments, and have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.